Walking on water is no easy feat, but if you're a 1 millimeter long bug, there's an even more difficult task, getting out of the water. That's because there's a small lip called a meniscus where the water meets the land. You can even see one in a glass of water. It's barely perceptible to the human eye, but to a tiny water-walking bug, it's enormous. How do they climb over this watery incline? A new study has found the answer. Dr. John Bush is one of the authors of the study. He's a mathematician at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He joins me from Cambridge, Massachusetts. So, Dr. Bush, first of all, what sort of creatures are we talking about here?
Basically, all water-walking creatures, unless they're capable of leaping from the water surface onto land, they've developed some form of this meniscus climbing technique.
Now, and so when we're talking about small creatures, right?
That's right. I mean, when we look at a standing body of water such as a pond, it's flat on human scales, but on the scale of these millimetric insects, they're typically a couple of millimeters maximum. These menisci, which adjoin the land, appear as frictionless mountains. A frictionless mountain would be pretty hard to climb. Well, tell me exactly what a meniscus is. So when you have a flat surface, when it adjoins land, there's a curvature. It has to curve in order to match up onto land. You see this in a cereal bowl. You see it in a glass of water. Whenever a flat surface matches onto a solid boundary.
And is it that the water is actually pulled up or pulls itself up?
That's right. That's right. It's in some sense attracted to the land, and so it slopes upwards to meet the land.
So this is then a slope that these insects, as you say, if they can't jump over it, have to climb it. How do they do that?
That's right. So they use this peculiar means of propulsion, which we were investigating. They basically move without moving. They lock into position. They deform the free surface in such a way as to pull themselves up the free surface. The best way, I think, to understand it is by analogy with some everyday physical systems. For example, Cheerios in a cereal bowl, you'll notice that those clump. They are attracted to one another by virtue of the fact that they deform the free surface, so they both have these menisci adjoining them. They're drawn together. Likewise for champagne bubbles in a champagne glass, they pull up on the free surface and therefore are attracted to one another. Likewise, when they get near the edge of the glass, near the background meniscus, they're pulled up very rapidly.
So can you tell me, and pick one species if you have to, tell me exactly what the creature does?
Okay, so they're basically two different varieties. One is terrestrial insects. So for example, if they're in a tree and they fall off onto the pond, they want to get out. How do they do it? Well, they aren't adapted for life at the surface, so they actually become wet by the fluid. So there's a contact line around the body of the insects. These things can look, for example, like slugs. They arch their backs and therefore generate menisci at both their head and their tail, and these menisci are then attracted to the menisci adjoining land, and they're drawn up the slope at very high speeds. It's typically 30 body lengths per second. If you compare that to the fastest human sprinter, moves at 5 body lengths per second. So these things are really moving very quickly. It's just that we had to use high-speed video cameras to elucidate their motion.
Boy, if they could get free of the water, they could practically launch themselves at that speed.
Indeed, indeed. And so that's the wetting insects. The other insects that are adapted for life on the free surface, or the water-walking insects, they're actually covered in they have a hairy body cover, which makes them effectively water repellent, so they're waterproof. And so you may wonder, well, if you're waterproof, how can you pull up on the free surface? And they have an ingenious adaptation. They have retractable claws. So these basically come out of their front legs and their back legs, and these claws are actually hydrophilic, that is to say, they're attracted to water, so they can dip those through the free surface and then pull up on the surface, therefore generating these dimples, which are then attracted up the meniscus and draw the bug with them.
That is absolutely incredible. I mean, they're so beautifully adapted to this.
They are. Well, it's a world dominated by surface tension, which is one that we aren't familiar with. We have intuition based on a world in which gravity is dominant, right. But in the world of the water-walking insect, the surface tension forces are equally important.
Well, thanks a lot for telling us about them.
Thank you very much.
Dr. John Bush is a mathematician at MIT. He joined me from Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Coming up after the break, we try to solve a mystery of the crescent moon right here on Earth. Or to keep our holidays straight. We'll explain what we mean next.